In May 2003, England saw the arrival of a little girl who quickly became known for her energetic personality, adventurous, cheerful, and outgoing. When she was about to turn 4, she proudly embraced her role as the older sister to the Chan and Amélie twins. Although she enjoyed playing with dolls, dressing up, and the colour pink, she and her brothers were conceived through in vitro fertilization after their parents spent several years trying to conceive naturally. The 3 children were a great joy to their family. The father, 38, was a cardiologist at Glenfield Hospital in Leicester, while the 37-year-old mother worked as an anesthesiologist at a general hospital in Melton, Norway. However, after having 3 young children, she reduced her working hours and transitioned to a role as a general practitioner in a rural area. The couple had become a couple in 1993 while studying at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Leicester, where they both graduated. With 3 children, careers ahead of them, and a stable marriage, the family seemed to be on a path to a peaceful life. However, all of this changed in a single night in 2007. The McCanns were friends and colleagues of Jane Tuna, Russell O'Brien, Fiona and David Time, Matthew and Rachel Oldfield, and Diana Webster. Together with their 8 children, they took a vacation in Praia da Luz, Portugal, staying at the Ocean Club tourist complex in the Algarve region. The area had great reviews, and many close friends had visited, claiming it to be a lovely, safe place for middle-class families. It was a region with a significant British and German expat presence. On the night of May 3rd, around 8:30 p.m., the McCanns left their 3 children sleeping in apartment 5 on the ground floor of the tourist complex. As usual, they went to dinner at a restaurant 50 metres away. Every 20 to 30 minutes, the friends took turns checking on the children in the rooms. However, at 10 p.m, when Kate took her turn to check, she found her daughter missing. Madeleine, who was about to turn 4, was no longer in her bed. A search throughout the complex yielded no results. The local police arrived 3 hours after the disappearance, a delay considered a critical error, as most abducted children are at a higher risk during the first few hours. Family and friends provided information to assist the investigation, and several witnesses reported seeing a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m. Kate recalled that when she entered the room, the window was open and a strong wind slammed the door shut. She also remembered that during breakfast that day, Madeleine had asked why she hadn't come to check on the children the night before when they were crying. Guests, employees, and about 200 local police officers joined forces to search the complex. The question arose, could the child have woken up, wandered out to find her parents, and gotten lost or had an accident? The McCanns insisted that this was not Madeleine's behaviour. The question that plagued everyone was, if a 3-year-old girl wasn't safe in a tourist complex, where could she be? As the search continued, questions arose about the parents' decision to leave the children alone while they went to dinner. Why had they not hired a babysitter? The initial investigation was led by Olegario Sousa, head of the Portimao Judicial Police, with regional oversight by Commissioner Gonzalo Amaral, head of the Criminal Investigation Department. His team reviewed photos taken by tourists and footage from security cameras where a man was seen carrying what initially appeared to be a bundle, later believed to be Madeleine, though it was never confirmed. Authorities alerted Interpol, and on May 9th, the yellow alert was lifted across the 190 member states. The Portuguese government heightened alerts at airports and borders, particularly with Spain, where the abductor could have fled. In the days that followed, the Portuguese police looked into potential suspects with criminal records related to kidnapping or child abuse in the area. In the first days after Madeleine's disappearance, the police believed she was alive and still within Portuguese territory. The initial theory suggested she might have been kidnapped by a pedophile ring, an illegal adoption network, or that a robbery had gone wrong. Robert Murat, a British citizen and neighbour of the resort complex, was the first suspect. He had volunteered to assist in the investigation as a translator and spokesperson, which raised suspicion due to his personal connection to the case. Murat's daughter resembled Madeleine, and he had not seen her for some time after a divorce. The police investigated his home at Liliana House, and on May 19th they travelled to England to meet his ex-wife. They also questioned his mother and other people associated with him. Witnesses tied Murat to a Russian man named Sergei Malinka, aged 22. The police seized a laptop and 2 hard drives belonging to Malinka, who had set up a website for Murat, and they communicated regularly about Madeleine's disappearance. On August 4th, the investigation at the Liliana complex was resumed using high-tech equipment and trained dogs. The dogs were brought in to inspect the area, and they dug through the gardens and cleared surrounding vegetation. Despite these efforts, no evidence was found. Murat was eventually cleared of suspicion and later sued the press for defamation, winning $850,000 in compensation. Over the first 11 days, multiple raids were conducted, and the National Republican Guard's search dogs combed the entire area, but they found no trace of Madeleine. On May 18th, the operation expanded, gaining more media attention. The Portuguese police broadened the search to 500 locations near the resort. The search went international, involving over 1,000 officers and 100 volunteers, all working to locate Madeleine. Helicopters, British police and kidnapping experts gathered in Praia da Luz to assist in the search. British experts arrived in Portugal to help the McCann family, including a team of mobile telephony experts who arrived on May 29, 2007. They analysed data from mobile communications around the time of the disappearance, using triangulation techniques to track the movement of phones in the area. Additional experts from the British Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre arrived on July 31st to help create a psychological profile of a potential kidnapper and support local detectives. The case attracted widespread media attention. The McCanns communicated regularly with the press, hoping that media support would help them find their daughter. About 200 journalists gathered daily at the tourist complex. The McCanns received advice from communication experts on how to manage the media and launched the website www.findmadeleine.com to gather more public support. They also launched an international campaign for help, using their Catholic faith to gain further support. The McCanns travelled to the Vatican to meet Pope Benedict XVI, asking for his spiritual support and requesting his blessing for Madeleine's photo. The McCanns also visited several countries, including the United States, where they met high-ranking officials in the George W. Bush administration. The U.S. experience in solving missing persons cases through media involvement inspired the McCanns to continue their campaign. High-profile individuals, including David Beckham, Ewan McGregor, J.K. Rowling and millionaire Stephen Winger, offered financial support to the investigation. Media coverage of the case reached political campaign levels, with Madeleine's face appearing on T-shirts, posters, car windshields, and even banners in football stadiums. The media offered a reward of $1.8 million for information on her whereabouts. However, this intense media focus created pressure on Portuguese investigators, who were criticised for their handling of the case. The increased attention raised fears that, if she had been kidnapped, the criminals might have harmed her due to the intense media scrutiny. By June, a month after Madeleine's disappearance, the police had few solid leads. A Portuguese police chief admitted that vital forensic evidence might have been lost because the apartment where Madeleine was last seen was not secured properly. It had been rented to tourists on 2 occasions after the McCanns had left, and officers had inadvertently contaminated the scene by smoking inside, leaving ashes behind. Additionally, the police had failed to check the apartment's trash, guest lists, or interview any of the complex's visitors. These mistakes were widely criticised in the press. On June 13, 2007, following a tip from Dutch media, the search expanded to a Monty area. By June 22nd, new information suggested that Madeleine could have been seen in Malta, where several locals claimed to have encountered a girl matching her description. In July, British police sent 2 trained tracking dogs to assist with the investigation. These dogs detected the scent of a corpse in the McCann's rental car and found traces of blood in the car's trunk. They also detected small traces of blood and the smell of a corpse in the apartment, as well as on some personal items belonging to the McCanns. This led to the analysis of fibres from the apartment's sofa, and Madeleine's favourite stuffed animal, the same one her mother always carried during her public appearances. The evidence was sent to British laboratories for analysis. By August 2007, the investigation shifted towards a Swiss citizen named Ursula Hansch, who had been vacationing near where Madeleine had been staying. Swiss police implicated him in the disappearance of a 5-year-old girl in the area. However, Hansch allegedly took the secret of his involvement to the grave by attempting suicide 3 months after Madeleine's disappearance. Meanwhile, the investigation turned its focus back to Robert Murat. On August 4th, the police conducted another search of his property using advanced technology, including trained dogs. Despite these efforts, no new evidence was discovered, and Murat was cleared of suspicion once again. The police had also released a description of a man seen carrying a child the night of Madeleine's disappearance, supporting the theory of kidnapping. However, no information came forward from the public in response to this release. After 100 days of searching, the police concluded that Madeleine was no longer alive. At the time, the investigation was treated as a criminal case. In a statement made to the media, Kate and Gerry McCann acknowledged that a crime was a possibility from the moment their daughter disappeared, but emphasised that they still held on to hope of finding her alive. Madeleine's parents contributed to the investigation in various ways. Gerry released a video stating that he believed his family had been watched by a sexual predator in the days before Madeleine's disappearance. The McCanns also issued sketches of a suspect based on a description from a British tourist who claimed to have seen a suspicious man near the resort in September 2007. Some tourists provided a photo from Morocco of a girl who resembled Madeleine, but Interpol confirmed it was a false lead. Interpol intervened in response to each false report of Madeleine's appearance in different countries, addressing misleading information. The media constantly fueled speculation and confusion, further complicating the case. As the investigation seemed to run out of leads, Portuguese police voiced frustration with the British. They felt disrespected by the British officers and the McCanns. Some Portuguese investigators believed that the focus on Madeleine's disappearance had overshadowed gathering evidence that could have been crucial. Other investigators, observing both Portuguese and British forces, noted that various agencies were more concerned with competing than with solving the crime. The lack of coordination between the two groups, compounded by cultural and language barriers, worsened the investigation. The British police criticised their Portuguese counterparts for waiting 3 months before requesting their assistance, which they argued hindered the investigation. By September 2007, the Portuguese police received the forensic results from tests conducted at the apartment from which Madeleine disappeared and in the rented car used by the McCanns. The results significantly changed the direction of the investigation. Gerry and Kate McCann were summoned as witnesses, and soon after, Gerry was named as a prime suspect in the alleged murder of their daughter. The investigation also extended to the 7 friends who had vacationed with the McCanns, as police identified inconsistencies and contradictions in their statements. These contradictions, along with a witness's claim that Jerry and Kate had been present at dinner the whole time, except for one brief absence, added fuel to the suspicions. Waiters reported that the couple had consumed 8 bottles of wine, almost one per person, which seemed excessive for parents who were supposed to be caring for their children. They also noted that 40 minutes passed between the discovery of Madeleine's disappearance and the call to the police. During this time, the McCanns' friends and hotel staff entered and left the room repeatedly. On September 9th, just days after Jerry and Kate were officially declared suspects, they returned to the UK. At East Midlands Airport, Jerry, accompanied by Kate and their twins, assured the public that they had returned with full cooperation and authorization from the Portuguese authorities. He stated that their return did not mean they would stop searching for Madeleine. Once in England, Madeleine's parents sought legal advice to defend themselves against the accusations from the Portuguese police. They contacted Michael Kaplan, the lawyer who had previously defended former Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet, as well as Angus McWright, who, along with Michael, was part of the British law firm Kensley Naples. Ultimately, it was lawyer Rogerio Alves who represented the McCanns. Kate spoke to the press, revealing that police had pressured her to confess to accidentally killing her daughter. She claimed they told her that if she confessed, she would serve just 2 or 3 years in prison. Kate appeared visibly distressed as she explained that she had been coerced and that the Portuguese police had tried to force her to lie. She described the entire situation as absurd. On October 2, 2007, the National Director of the Portuguese Judicial Police, Luís Ribeiro, informed the public that the commissioner responsible for the investigation during the first 7 months, Goncalo Amaral, had been dismissed. The reason for his removal was his public statement to the press, in which he claimed that British police had favoured Jerry and Kate. Amaral's replacement, Paulo Rebelo, was appointed soon after his dismissal. Following his departure from the case, Amaral commented that he believed his removal was due to a meeting between the American and British ambassadors in Lisbon in September 2007, 2 weeks after Jerry and Kate were officially named as the main suspects. Amaral insisted that no evidence had been found to support the theory that Madeleine had been kidnapped, but there was evidence suggesting parental negligence. The former investigator maintained that the McCanns had accidentally killed their daughter and concealed her body. He speculated that Madeleine's death might have been caused by a violent accident or the administration of medicines or tranquilizers, but these theories remain unproven and are considered mere speculations. Once Jerry and Kate McCann returned to their country, they decided to launch their own investigation. They hired the Spanish detective agency Método 3, whose director, Francisco Marco, confidently stated that Madeleine was alive and had been kidnapped by an international pedophile network. He did not rule out Robert, a suspect previously identified by police as being involved. The agency claimed to have mobilized over 20 detectives for the search and established a call center to collect information in multiple languages, including French, English, Portuguese, Arabic and Spanish. Investigations into this alleged international paedophile network focused on Portugal and Morocco, where they believed Madeleine was taken after being kidnapped in the Algarve. Meanwhile, Jerry and Kate faced challenges in England. The British press expressed scepticism about their innocence, questioning their potential involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. Newspapers suggested not only that the McCanns might have murdered their daughter with the help of their travelling companions, but also that they were involved in a network of partner swapping. Offended, Jerry and Kate initiated a legal battle against the British press for defamation. In March 2008, the High Court in London ruled in their favour, ordering the Express Newspapers Group to pay the McCanns $583,000 in damages. On March 19th, the front pages of these newspapers published apologies to Jerry, Kate and their friends, who the press had mockingly dubbed the Tapas Seven. The group of friends also received $398,000 in compensation, which was allocated to the Madeleine Fund. The McCanns argued that defamatory reports had hindered efforts to search for Madeleine. Following this, they changed lawyers and launched a new media campaign to shift attention back to the search for Madeleine and away from allegations about their involvement. The investigations continued. Detectives examined cases such as that of Santiago del Valle, who had murdered a young girl named Mari Luz Cortez, but found no connection to Madeleine's disappearance. Around this time, lawyer Marcos Aragao Correa organized a search of the Arade Reservoir in the Algarve using divers. Although some bones were discovered, they were confirmed to belong to an animal. As Jerry and Kate focused on their investigation, former Commissioner Goncalo Amaral released a book in September 2008 titled, In it, Amaral aimed to clear his name and disclose details of the investigation. Within 2 weeks, 120,000 copies had been sold. The Portuguese police faced pressure to decide on the Madeleine case. In November 2008, a new team from the Portuguese Judicial Police travelled to the UK to meet with British officers and conduct additional interviews with the suspects. However, the British government refused to allow Kate and Jerry to return to Portugal for questioning, despite requests from Portuguese authorities. Investigators from both countries re-examined DNA evidence connected to the case. Their findings formed the basis of a Portuguese Ministry of Justice report, which eventually led to the removal of suspect status for the McCanns and their friends. The case was archived due to insufficient evidence to continue the investigation. The report noted that DNA results from alleged blood and corpse odour traces attributed to Madeleine indicated a high degree of certainty, but fell short of the 88% threshold needed to sustain charges. It was also suggested that the detected blood might have been present for 7 years, though no explanation for this conclusion was provided. Now free of suspicion, Jerry returned to Portugal in April 2009. With the case officially archived, he proposed making a documentary to commemorate the 2-year anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance. However, tensions were high at the Ocean Club, where the disappearance had occurred. Just 1 day before Jerry's arrival, 21 of the 48 employees of Green Trust SA, the company that owned the resort, were dismissed. The company cited significant financial losses stemming from the Madeleine incident and the devaluation of the pound sterling. On the day of filming, Jerry arrived with a British television team from Channel 4 to recreate events surrounding Madeleine's disappearance. Filming took place at the Ocean Club and nearby areas. Dismissed employees expressed confusion, questioning how much the McCanns might have paid Green Trust SA to facilitate the dismissals. For residents of Praia da Luz, Madeleine's disappearance was considered the worst public relations disaster for the Algarve. Locals pointed out that businesses dependent on tourism like the Ocean Club suffered the consequences as customer numbers dwindled. When Jerry was spotted on the streets during filming, some passers-by booed him, telling him to leave town and stop disrupting their lives. A local newspaper reported that Emma Loach, daughter of the British filmmaker, directed the documentary for Channel 4, which aired in May 2009. The number of customers dropped drastically when Jerry was seen on the street during filming. Some passers-by booed him, told him they were tired of him, and demanded that he leave the town and go home. The rights to the documentary were sold to television stations in Portugal and several European countries. Amid criticism and legal battles, Jerry and Kate maintained that their main goal was to find their daughter and ensure the investigations remained open. As a result, they took legal action against the Portuguese police, arguing that they had been denied access to investigation files, which they believed were essential for the private investigators they hired in March 2010. A Portuguese court ordered the delivery of the 2,000-page investigation dossier to Madeleine's parents. Former Commissioner Goncalo Amaral commented that Portugal had a weak government when dealing with the British, calling the closing of the investigation into Madeleine's mysterious disappearance a disgrace to his country's justice system. Goncalo also faced legal action from Jerry and Kate for the sale of his book. The book was pulled from shelves in September 2009 following a precautionary measure in a Lisbon civil court, but Goncalo appealed the decision in Lisbon's Court of Appeal, and the right to distribute his book was restored in February 2010. This decision was later upheld by the Supreme Court of Portugal in November 2010, which ruled that freedom of expression should take precedence over the McCann's honour. The case eventually escalated to the European Court of Human Rights, which in September 2022 ruled in favour of the Supreme Court of Portugal and Goncalo Amaral. In 2011, Kate decided to write a book to raise funds to continue the search for her daughter. The book, titled, detailed her suffering from Madeleine's disappearance, the depression that almost caused her to lose her marriage, and the thoughts of ending her life by throwing herself into the sea. That same year, Madeleine's parents appealed to the British government to reopen the investigation. Their request gained traction when they published an open letter from the McCanns, signed by 2,000 people, urging Prime Minister David Cameron to launch a new investigation. In response, the British government launched Operation Grange, funded by a contingency fund from the Home Office. The operation was led by Commander Simon Foy, with Andy Redwood from Scotland Yard's Homicide and Serious Crime Command serving as Detective Chief Inspector, DCI. DCI Andy worked directly under Detective Chief Superintendent James Campbell. The team was composed of 3 inspectors, 5 sergeants, 19 detective officers and about 6 civilian staff members, all tasked with reviewing the case from the beginning. In 2012, Scotland Yard focused on the hypothesis that Madeleine might still be alive. And to generate new leads, Interpol issued a yellow alert featuring an age-progressed image of her at 9 years old. By July 2013, the review had turned into a formal investigation. Scotland Yard announced that they had new evidence and witnesses related to Madeleine's disappearance. They also revealed that the case would be reopened with 38 people of interest under investigation, 13 of whom were British. At this point, the Portuguese police had closed their investigation. In a BBC television investigation, police presented images of a man seen carrying a blonde child of around 3 or 4 years old in Praia da Luz, about 25 minutes before Madeleine's disappearance. The suspect, described as having short brown hair, medium height, clean-shaven white, and aged between 20 and 40, became a focus of renewed investigation. Portuguese authorities reopened their case with Scotland Yard, citing new leads and asking for public assistance in identifying the man, as locating him became vital to the investigation. By 2014, British detectives flew to Portugal to question 3 suspects from a burglary gang active in the Algarve region, considering their possible involvement in the case. However, no new evidence emerged. Searches were conducted in Praia da Luz, including in scrubland southwest of the Ocean Club, but nothing of interest was found. Investigators dug in several areas and used dogs trained for these types of missions, alongside more advanced equipment such as radar and sewer, gas and electricity pipe inspections. Despite significant media attention, the June 2014 search operation yielded no results. Scotland Yard officers continued interviewing individuals connected to the case in hopes of uncovering fresh evidence. From 2011 to 2022, the UK Home Office allocated approximately $15.5 million to the investigation. The team translated tens of thousands of documents, reviewed over 8,000 potential sightings, and investigated 650 sex offenders and 60 individuals with criminal records. A total of 1,338 statements were taken, 1,027 exhibits were collected, and 31 investigators were dedicated to the case. Despite these efforts, the investigation was eventually halted in 2020. The case took a new turn in 2020 when German and British police identified a formal suspect for the first time, Christian Bruckner, a 43-year-old sex offender who was serving a prison sentence in Germany for the rape of a 72-year-old woman and other crimes committed in Praia da Luz. The suspect had sold his car, a Jaguar XJR6, one day after Madeleine's disappearance and left for Germany. His phone was also connected for 30 minutes to a number linked to the area where Madeleine went missing. Based on these clues, German prosecutors initiated an investigation into the possibility that Christian had murdered Madeleine, presuming her dead due to his criminal background. In statements to the media, German police declared the case closed. By 2022, only 4 detectives remained investigating the case under the Cold Case Department. They stayed updated on any new developments. In February 2023, the newspaper published that German police had been unable to prove that Christian had kidnapped Madeleine, and no definitive evidence supporting this theory had been found, especially as her body had never been recovered. On February 19, 2023, Julia Faustina Wandel, a 21-year-old Polish woman living in Germany, reignited public interest in the case. She posted on Instagram suggesting she might be Madeleine due to physical similarities and the fact that she had no memory of her past. Julia sought a DNA test to confirm the possibility, and Kate and Jerry agreed. This renewed attention brought the case back into the public spotlight, leading to speculation that the McCanns may have been involved in their daughter's disappearance. However, despite these claims, the DNA test was never conducted. Julia's story sparked debate on social media, raising questions about her motivations and the legitimacy of her claims. A user asked why Julia didn't ask her parents to take a DNA test, to which she replied that they had refused. On her account, Julia shared several photographs and details that led her to believe she could be Madeleine, most notably one showing a coloboma in her right eye, which is strikingly similar to Madeleine's. This eye condition is rare, but Julia argued that kidnapped children often have their names and birth dates changed. Madeleine would be 19 years old, 3 years younger than Julia, but she doesn't consider this definitive proof. Julia claims she has no clear memories of her early childhood and doesn't recall being kidnapped, though vague images of a beach visit reminiscent of Portugal come to mind. She has never seen photos of her early life and isn't sure her parents have her birth certificate. Julia believes they've hidden information from her and refused to give clear answers when she asked if they were her real parents. When she asked them, they responded with another question that led to further uncertainty. Within 2 days, her account gained 1,000 followers. For many, Julia is seen as a girl with mental health issues seeking attention, but the situation seems more complex. Before creating her account, Julia had made complaints to the police in Germany, Poland, and the United Kingdom. She shared personal details of her life on her account, such as being raped by a German abuser and suffering from post-traumatic stress and depression. Francisco Marco, former director of the detective agency Method 3, who had worked on the McCann case, compared photographs of both girls and stated that initial biometric tests suggest Julia is not Madeleine. However, they were still awaiting DNA results. The Metropolitan Police in London expressed doubt over Julia's claims, pointing out that everything suggested Madeleine died the day she disappeared, making it impossible for Julia to be her. They conducted a facial aging comparison using a robot image of Madeleine, and no resemblance was found. On February 28th, Julia's biological parents issued a statement through the Missing Persons Organization, as reported by the New York Post. They assured the public that their daughter is not Madeleine, and expressed concern for Julia's mental health, especially after she recently moved out and stopped taking her psychiatric medication. In a public apology, they explained they had always tried to understand Julia's struggles, seeking help from therapy, psychologists and psychiatrists. They also mentioned having memories and photos of Julia's childhood, though Julia denied the evidence. The authorities in Poland, her home country, have since closed the case. Julia's psychic medium and psychologist Johansson stated that Julia's mother refuses to undergo a DNA test despite Johansson's personal conversation with her, where she promised to protect her. Julia remains determined to uncover her true identity. Psychic medium Aerosmither claimed that Julia had taken the DNA test and could possibly be another missing girl named Lydia Sheff, who vanished in Switzerland in 2011 with her twin sister Alicia. In early April 2023, DNA results confirmed that Julia is not connected to Madeleine's family. Psychic Fire revealed to Sam's diary that Julia is now open to the possibility of being Lydia, and they both continue to investigate this theory. Julia is not the first young woman to claim to be Madeleine. 3 others previously tried to assume her identity on social media. Some believe this behavior stems from the intense media attention surrounding the case, creating a need to find an answer to the mystery. One example is a young Swedish woman, Emira Auju Harvey, who closely resembled Madeleine but was 8 years older. She claimed to be British and named herself Mary. However, when the media picked up the story, her father denied it, explaining that she had run away from home 6 months earlier and had Asperger's syndrome. In 2018, a Manchester University student claimed to share Madeleine's physical features, including a similar eye coloboma and moles. She initially believed she might be Madeleine, but by then Madeleine would have been 14, while the student was already attending university. She eventually admitted that it was a joke based on physical coincidences. In 2020, a Brazilian TikTok user posted a video claiming to be the missing girl, showing the same eye coloboma and expressing the shock of possibly being Madeleine. However, the age difference was significant. While Madeleine would have been 18, the Brazilian was 21. In the end, the Brazilian confessed it was a joke. John Tully, president of the Metropolitan Police Federation, remarked that at some point authorities would have to stop chasing shadows around the world. He referred to the various theories surrounding Madeleine's disappearance, which included kidnapping by a pedophile, trafficking by organ dealers, her leaving on her own, a tragic accident, or even the possibility that her parents orchestrated her disappearance. Countless theories exist, but none have supporting evidence. After more than 16 years of searching, Madeleine's case remains open as a missing person, continuing to capture the public's attention. A report in 2022 noted that the investigation had accumulated 12,000 pages of official documents, over 2,000 police procedures, and 500 searches in the area where she disappeared. Several books have been written on the case, including 2 by Kate McCann, and a streaming service created an 8-episode series. For some, the ongoing public interest is due to the McCann's media management and efforts to keep the investigation alive and prove their innocence. Others feel the McCanns have exploited their personal tragedy for financial gain, with accusations that they used money from the Madeleine fund to pay their mortgage. For some, the case is simply one that any parent can relate to, which is why it remains so prominent. The truth is, there are still no indications that the case will be legally resolved, as neither the Portuguese nor British police have found new evidence to solve the mystery. As long as the enigma persists, Madeleine's disappearance will remain a major topic on social media and in the media, providing ample material for public speculation and theories, while the investigators have yet to deliver answers. Very often you can hear the opinion that Sweden is one of the safest countries in the world. Perhaps this is true, but the Swedish justice system in this story turned out to be too humane, so humane that it led to a whole series of deaths. Sunny spring day, April 5th, 2008, RSN, Sweden. Thomas Anton, a local resident, and his wife, together with a couple of friends, were enjoying the wonderful weather and going for a walk. Thomas had just bought a new digital camera and was impatient to try it out. The company was walking along a deserted road. The man was taking pictures of everything around him, and suddenly he saw a girl on a bicycle ahead. He took a picture to see how the camera shoots moving objects. A couple of minutes later, with the same purpose, he photographed a car that was driving behind the girl. The walk continued, and Thomas forgot about these working shots until it turned out that they are the most important evidence in one of the most high-profile cases in Sweden in the 21st century. Engel was a cheerful 10-year-old Swedish girl. Engel had a beloved brother who was only a year older, and they had a very warm relationship. Engel's mother, Carina, had long since separated from the girl's biological father and married another man. Engel had a good relationship with her stepfather. The family lived in the tiny village of RSN with a population of 161 people. Engel loved to sing and dance, participated in all school concerts, and loved football very much. That Saturday, Engel just had a training session on the football field 4 kilometers from home. She went there for the first time alone on her bicycle. The journey took about 15 minutes. Carina's mother strictly took her word that she would definitely call when the training session was over. Engel did so. At about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, she dialed her mother's number and said that she was going home, but time passed and the girl was still not there, and she did not answer the calls. Worried, Carina went to look for her daughter. She walked 400 m along the gravel path which led from their cottage to the main road, came out onto the highway and walked all the way to the stadium. Engel was nowhere to be found. Carina hurried home, hoping that her daughter lost her phone and was already at home, but literally 200 m from their house, she made a terrible discovery. Engel's white bicycle was lying near the trees at the edge of the forest. The woman immediately called the police. Almost immediately a search party was assembled, since the first version was that Eng got lost in the forest. Perhaps she saw a bear, and throwing her bicycle ran into the thicket. This happened often, and the law enforcement officers had experience in conducting such searches. They used a helicopter equipped with a thermal imager as well as service dogs. At first the version of kidnapping for the purpose of ransom. But the family hog lived very modestly and quietly, so that this version was quickly dismissed. The bicycle girls sent to the lab for checking local residents joined the search, and soon the news of the disappearance of the child spread throughout the area, and a day later the disappearance of Engel was announced on television. Thomas Langton, hearing about Engel's disappearance, realized with horror that most likely he was the last who saw the girl. He immediately reported it to the police and provided his photos, saying that a red SUP was driving behind her, which was driven by a white man on a bicycle, which was also sent for examination. By this time found traces of someone else's DNA from the lab. Also came RAU traceological examination. Next to Engel's bicycle were found tyre marks completely matching those that were put on Sab 90, in addition to Thomas, the girl that day, a local resident, who saw both the red car and its driver, who parked, went out to smoke. She seemed to know him by sight and soon remembered it was one of the drivers who worked at her gas station. She even remembered his name, Anders Eklund. At the same time, investigators, by the license plate number of the car, with Thomas's photo, identified the owner of the red sub. It was the same Anders Eklund. 30 hours after the girl's disappearance, he was arrested at a rest area for drivers 30 kilometres from the border of the buildings. Engel was not with him. Anders II was born in a very ordinary family. Mother was a housewife, father a driver in childhood. In his youth he did not attract attention in any way, played football and basketball, studied well and not so well. After finishing school he entered courses auto mechanics, which he finished already somehow, since the focus of his attention, like all teenagers, shifted to girls. However, real girls did not really reciprocate. And Anders got carried away by watching pornography profession he still got, and got a job in a large transport company, began to earn good money, and at the age of 20 he moved away from his parents. Renting a small apartment at 29, he met a pretty young woman, several years younger. She had 2 children, and they accepted Anders very warmly. One day they had fun at an amusement park, and on the way back they got into a serious car accident. Despite Anders's driving experience, he couldn't avoid the collision, and his red Volkswagen plunged into a ditch. By sheer luck, the children were unhurt, though his companions suffered a broken wrist and a knee injury. Anders, who was wearing a seatbelt, struck his head violently on the windshield. After the accident, his behaviour seemed to change, as his brother mentioned. He became more aggressive and began seeking solitude. In 1995, he was arrested for the first time after beating and attempting to rape a woman in a park. Eklund received only a fine, but just weeks later he assaulted another victim. For these 2 incidents, he was sentenced to 1 year and 10 months in prison. 3 weeks after his release, he again attempted to rape a 16-year-old whom he met on the street while intoxicated, and was again put behind bars for 6 months after his release. He broke into someone else's house and tried to rape another 16-year-old girl while she was sleeping. For this, he received 4 months served. He was arrested again for indecent behaviour towards a woman. He showed her his genitals. In 2004, he received another fine for peeping into the women's locker room. And then in 2008, police raided his apartment in connection with the disappearance and possible kidnapping of 10-year-old NGL GND. They found scatterings of pornographic magazines there, a whole collection of worn several dozen cassettes, with pornography including pedophilic and zoophilic nature. At the front door they found binoculars. Apparently Eklund liked to spy on women all over the room. There were empty bottles and garbage scattered. He also had a notebook with many phone numbers of various women from all over the country. After analysing information from his laptop, it turned out that Eklund was fond of communicating on the internet, especially in chats. Whereas the registration was possible, since the age of 15, he presented himself as a tall, dark-haired, muscular truck driver, 27 years old. While in life he was a plump, flabby, balding man with glasses, 42 years old. Also on his computer were more than 100 photographs of children of a pornographic nature. At that time, the rescue operation to search for Engel in the forest was in its 3rd day. The weather had finally deteriorated. It began to snow and rain. During this time, a child's jacket was found in the forest, but it did not belong to Enley. The police decided to suspend the search in the forest and focus on the kidnapping version. The girl's mother, Karina, insisted on this. Eklund denied any in this case and expressed extreme indignation that he was brought in. He was stalling for time, knowing that he could only be detained for a day, and the investigators had no evidence. On Thursday, they had to let him go. However, the samples taken from him DNA results, which came on Saturday, led the investigation to the most unexpected and tragic events that happened in 2000, in a completely different place then, in the town of Falun. There was an annual street festival. At the same time, the mother of a 31-year-old florist from Copenhagen, Pernille Hulgen, celebrated her 50th birthday. After celebrating the anniversary of Mother Pernille and her sister went to have fun, visited 2 restaurants, and at 2 o'clock in the morning the woman decided to go home because she met her ex-boyfriend. They had a fight, and she did not want to continue the party. But she never returned to her parents' house at about the same time. When Nila was walking home, a 16-year-old teenage girl named Linda, who was also late for the party, drove through a dark tunnel. Hurrying home in the tunnel, she saw how a large man was sitting astride a blonde woman and strangling her in the light of the lanterns. Linda saw that the woman's hair was covered in blood. She rushed home in horror and told her mother everything. But Tar didn't believe her, told her not to pay attention and sent her to bed. But Linda couldn't calm down. And in the morning she called her friend, her dad, who was a policeman. At the scene they immediately conducted a search and found the naked body of a woman lying on her back, with her arms spread out to the sides. Her clothes were scattered around. Her face was unknown, was disfigured. After 2 days she was identified as Pernille Helgen, whose relatives filed a missing person report. Linda could not accurately describe the criminal because it was dark, but she said that it was a fat man in glasses, dressed in jeans and a denim jacket. A little later, investigators found fragments of someone else's DNA on the trousers of Pernille and Anders Eklund. Most of these suspects were ordinary, respectable citizens or simply did not fit the given Linda's description. The fat man, Eklund, was the 21st on the list among all ever attracting and suitable in appearance suspects. However, he was never checked due to the negligence of the police officers. Eklund was registered in another area, and no one wanted to go to his home. Moreover, after the program about the murder, Pernille, the man, reported that it was possible Anders Eklund was involved in this case. But even this fact did not force the police to go to the address of the criminal. Despite still being on the list of suspects, as later commented by the police officers leading the case, there was nothing suspicious about Eklund. One of his acquaintances later shared that Anders frequently visited the bar where he worked as a bartender. Anders in general was a nice guy, the acquaintance said, but after drinking he became a different person and began acting aggressively toward women. He always warned women not to go anywhere with him. The acquaintance also noted that even a small amount of alcohol would make Anders behave irrationally. The investigators were shocked when they discovered that the DNA found at the scene of Pernille's murder matched that of the unknown criminal. After this revelation, the suspect was immediately detained and charged with the murder of the 8-year-old girl. He immediately agreed with them and, in the presence of a lawyer, told how on that night 2 years ago he saw a lonely girl. He allegedly met her, and she invited him to her mother's home, but he was impatient to have sexual intercourse with her, right on the street. In a dark tunnel, Eklund began to pester her. After receiving a refusal, beat her, and then dragged her to the park where he raped and killed her. He did not know, in fact, the trial. He examined her from the bar itself. She noticed this and quickened her pace along the way, trying to call the emergency services. This number was the last on the list of calls. Having caught up with the woman in a dark tunnel, Eklund hit her on the head and knocked her unconscious, and carried her to the park. A little later, under pressure from the evidence, came results of a genetic examination of material from the girl's bicycle. Eklund told how he killed Eng and where he hid her body. He threw her behind. According to Ayland's version, he got out of his car to smoke on the highway and saw how Eng drive past smoke. He drove on and noticed the gravel exit from the highway where trees were being cut down. He decided to see if there was anything to profit from and caught up with this girl again, thinking why so small and alone in such a wilderness. He could not explain why he killed her, he allegedly asked. But the girl boldly replied that she does not talk to strangers, and kicked his car with her foot. He got angry and pushed her. She fell off her bike, and he dragged the child into his car later. He confessed that he raped her, but the girl desperately resisted, and again Pina his feet, from which he became even more angry, and pressing the fragile body with all his weight to the ground, clasped his hands on her throat after and died once. A bike ray at the edge of the forest, hid the body in the trunk, and drove as far away from the crime scene as possible. On the way, he changed clothes, drank coffee, ate pizza. Having reached the place, he pulled the body of the child out of the trunk, carried it deeper into the forest, and doused it with gasoline arson. The news of Engel's death shocked the entire people of Sweden. The whole country hoped that Eng would return safe and sound. Her funeral on May 10, 2008, were broadcast live on television after a video in which the still alive and cheerful girl performs at a concert at school, revealed during her search. Details raised many questions among the population. Why was Eklund free? Why, after the murder Pernilla case, Carina HGN filed a lawsuit? Negligence against the police investigated, but he was OTK due to weak connection between the two cases later. Independent investigation of the Stockholm police confirmed that if in 2000 the police had conducted the investigation according to all the rules, then Eklund would have been arrested within a few months, but he was not arrested. On July 8, 2008, defendant Anders Eklund was found guilty of murder-rape under aggravating circumstances, Pernilla and NGL-HGN, and possession of child pornography. Carina GND mother Engel was removed from the courtroom because she could not contain her emotions and shouted obscene comments at her daughter's killer and his lawyer. As she was led away, Carina shouted, Egan, looking straight into his eyes, "The best thing you can do is kill yourself." On October 6th, Eklund was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. Despite all the attempts of the lawyer to make him out to be mentally ill and not give Otter in his actions, according to the results of forensic examination, he was found completely sane for the court. It was obvious that both murders were premeditated and planned. He followed Neil from the bar, and she never offered him to have sex, and he turned off the highway not at all in order to steal building materials. He turned with TM. The intention to mock rid her bike on a deserted road. After the verdict, Eklund was sent to Norrtälje Penitentiary, a maximum security prison north of Stockholm in Norrtälje Penitentiary. There is a special wing for persons who have committed a sex crime, known as a sex blogger. But on the same day, having received the necessary help, he went to another institution in 2018. Eklund tried to replace his life sentence with a fixed term, which would give him the opportunity to get out of prison someday. But this time the humane Swedish court rejected his request due to the high risk of reoffending a serious crime. If released in 2020, he applied for a transfer to another prison, which was granted, but upon arrival there he was again beaten by a neighbour in the camera. At the moment, a number of unsolved cases of a sexual nature are being developed that may be connected to Anders Eklund. Among them is the mysterious disappearance of a 6-year-old girl in 1997 at the site where NGL-HGN's body was found. Caring residents of Sweden erected a monument with an image of an angel. After all, the name Eng means angel. This incident happened in France. The main character of this story, her name is Lydia Guardo. She was born on November 13th, 1960, in a city called Enalforno in the department of Val-de-Marne, which is located 9 kilometers from Paris. To start this story, we will have to go back to the past. Raymond Guardo and his bride Jacqueline got married in 1956. In the first years of their official union, they had 2 children, a boy Bruno and his sister Nadia. At first sight, the newly made family seemed normal by all possible signs. However, sometime after the birth of Nadia, her father Raymond was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison for armed robbery. While the man was serving his sentence in prison, his wife Jacqueline had a whirlwind romance with a man, as a result of which the woman became pregnant. During one of the permitted visits, Jacqueline informed her husband about this, making it clear that the child was not his. Despite this, Raymond treated the information he heard with understanding and expressed a desire to recognize the child, who was the fruit of his wife's extramarital affair. Soon a girl was born who was christened Lydia Guardo. Years later, the man was released almost immediately. Relationship with his wife Jacqueline, who was left alone with 3 children, apparently the woman did not have much love for her offspring. In connection with this, she decided to give them to the guardianship of a social organization, which soon placed them in a foster family. According to the available data, the children were lucky, and they fell into the hands of a family that not only loved them like family, but also gave them everything they needed to start a new stage in life. For the support, Bruno provided the eldest child always hoped that his biological parents would come for him and his sisters. Moreover, he even instilled in his sisters hope that this would happen someday. While still in prison, Raymond saw in the newspaper an advertisement for the matchmaking of a certain woman called Isia Nago. Relationship by correspondence, once at liberty, Raymond found this woman and soon married her. After marriage, the man got it into his head that he needed to get his children back by any available means. One night, a man with a gun in his hands burst into the house of the family with whom his children were. Hearing a noise that came from the first floor of the girl's house, seriously frightened, Nadia didn't remember what her father looked like, and Lydia did not know the man at all. They had the impression that it was none other than the cannibal who was going to eat them, since they did not have time to fall asleep in time. As a result, Raymond managed to take the children from the foster family and put them in his car, despite the resistance of the owners of the house, who threatened the man with the police. There is no information that this act of the man had any legal consequences for him. Perhaps the representatives of the foster family were simply scared. Raymond was not reported to the police about the kidnapping he had committed. After several hours spent on the road, the man brought his children to his home. There he introduced Lucienne to the children and said that she was their new mother, which meant that they would now have to obey her. Apparently, the first years of life together were, at least that is the impression based on family photographs taken during this period. The family moved to a new house located in a quiet and cosy place. Raymond received a cash allowance and at the same time developed his own business offering instant printing of postcards for all occasions, as well as various office supplies. Lun also periodically worked in the company of her husband. However, mainly she was engaged in office activities over time, the life of the family began to change dramatically. So thus, the slightly grown-up children began to be subjected to cruel treatment and physical aggression from their father and stepmother. The first thing Lydia remembered from that time period is how Raymond beat up her brother Bruno for playing with a neighbour's child. When the Guardo spouses went to work, they hired young girls who were supposed to look after the children. Returning home, Raymond forced these girls to drink alcohol with him. Once the man even tried to persuade one of the girls to intimacy, but she managed to escape later, the father. This girl came to the house to sort things out with Raymond House, and as a result inflicted serious injuries on him. After this, the man no longer hired nannies. Sometime after this incident, he bought a trailer to take his family on vacation to the sea. Having reached their destination, the members of the Guardo family, like other vacationers, spent time on the beach and swam in the water. However, something unexpected occurred, deviating from normal behaviour. Finding himself in the water, Raymond approached his daughter and unnaturally pulled her close to his body. The girl struggled to free herself from her father's grasp, but her resistance only seemed to worsen the situation for him. But soon they were discovered and punished. However, after that unsuccessful attempt, a 15-year-old young man who had endured years of physical aggression managed to escape. For many years he was subjected to physical aggression, but he was still able to escape. According to some reports, the young man contacted law enforcement officials and told them about the situation in his parents' house. Despite this, the authorities did not want to understand what they heard and simply passed the teenager to another emergency room. Meanwhile, the young man's sisters continued to suffer because of their father's inclinations. As the girls grew up, their breasts began to form. Noticing this, Raymond began to bandage them with elastic bandages so tightly that his daughters had difficulty breathing themselves. The bandages eventually turned into smelly rags because the man forbade them to be removed for several months. He did not want anyone else to his daughters to be hurt by him. Several years later, Bruno, a matured young man, reappeared and returned for his sister Nadia, who'd already reached adulthood at that time. In the end, he was able to save her while Lydia was still in danger. Her room became a dark and damp attic of the house where Raymond, without knowing fear, gave free rein to all his perverted over her 3 times a day. Lydia never forgave her sisters and brother for leaving her there. She did not resign herself, and more than once managed to escape from home, but her father spread information that his youngest daughter suffered from mental illness. So when she turned to the authorities, they immediately returned her home. So after another escape, Raymond even put the girl on a chain when Lydia turned 18. Her father decided that it was time for her to bear him children. The man was so eager to bring his idea to life that after each act of intimacy he tied the girl's legs, allegedly in order to increase the chance of pregnancy at 19. Lydia for the first time got pregnant, and almost all of the following 9 months she spent on a leash. In this way, the man wanted to prevent possible abortion attempts by the girls. Lydia gave birth to her first child on December 8, 1982. The boy was named Raymond in honor of his father. In the future, Lydia did not give up attempts to escape, but Raymond caught her time and again and cruelly punished her. Once she was locked in the attic for as long as 6 months. During this time, her father and stepmother repeatedly abused her, often using improvised means. Kitchen utensils. Rats became the girl's only friends. After the first child, 5 more children followed, who were born between 1986 and 1996. According to some sources, the last child, a boy named Rudy, was not Raymond's son and was conceived by Lydia during her next escape. Children, of course, were a great pride. At first, they did not even know who their real mother was. Neighbours, owners of grocery stores, and even representatives of local authorities came to greet the head of a large family and to express their respect to him. Raymond, in turn, did not hide the origin of his children. This information was something like an open secret. Every time when Lydia was preparing for her birth, the man took her to a hospital located abroad and, under threat of death, forced her to say that he was her partner and the father of the children. Raymond knew very well how to manipulate a girl, and Lydia simply did not have the strength and ways to resist him. The end of this story came in one. Being a diabetic, Raymond Guardo began to get seriously ill. In general, he never monitored his health. One of the ones deteriorated sharply, and the man had several toes on his left leg amputated after the operation. The man again BRK recommendations of doctors. And thus he brought himself to critical condition. In one day, Lydia came to visit him in the hospital, and she was told that he died the previous night from pulmonary embolism. Hearing this news, the girl burst into tears. She as if in one moment forgot about everything that happened to her due to the fault of the deceased. Later, Lydia herself could not explain the reason for such a reaction to the death of the man who had mocked her for so long. Perhaps the fact was that Raymond, despite everything, was the only unchanging component of her unhappy life leaving the hospital building the girl remembered. How one day Raymond made her swear that she would part with her life immediately after his death. Apparently many years of control by the deceased man affected Lydia's consciousness. She drove to the nearest bridge without thinking, jumped into the river. When she fell, she lost consciousness. And when she came to her senses, she was surrounded by rescuers who pulled her out of the water. At that moment she realized that the horror of the past was already behind her. So ended the story full of bullying, aggression and imprisonment that lasted for 28 years. Thus Lydia finally became free to her own regret. She did not feel the slightest satisfaction from the fact that justice had prevailed in relation to Raymond. After her release, Lydia still had to go through several difficult trials. Being an illiterate and unemployed girl, she had to rebuild her life. In addition, she had to establish relationships with her children, who were raised by their father and stepmother, having been deprived of any communication with her. Fortunately, after many years of ignoring the existing problem, the authorities gave her support. So Lydia was initially allowed to stay in the house where she was kept in captivity. True, she no longer dared to go up to the attic, since there she was subjected to unspeakable abuse. Lydia's stepmother, who was 68 at the time, appeared in court only in 2007. Unfortunately, in her case it could not be said that justice had prevailed. The elderly woman was sentenced to 3 years of imprisonment, probably for not preventing the crimes committed by her husband before her eyes. Later, this sentence was appealed and increased to 4 years of imprisonment, probably in 2008, when the media went crazy over another case. Long-term imprisonment woman Lydia plucked up courage and told everyone about her own experience. She was still illiterate. However, thanks to cooperation with journalists and writers Jean-Michel Radem, the woman was able to publish a book in which she outlined her thorny path to freedom, among other things. In her book she criticized various government agencies that, according to her, during the days of her escapes, returned her to hell without even trying to understand the situation. Lydia paid special attention in the book to her stepmother, a woman who, throughout all these years, not only stayed on the sidelines, but also took an active part in acts of physical aggression against her and other children, also medical workers who so often treated her injuries, such as burns, bruises and cuts. According to the woman, the staff of medical institutions simply turned a blind eye to the obvious facts of rudeness towards her and preferred to remain on the sidelines for approximately the same reason Lydia scolded her neighbours, in her opinion. These people heard the screams of children on a daily basis, but despite this, they did not dare to contact this or that social organisation and ask its employees to visit their home. And finally Lydia reproached the entire French justice system for inaction, which made, to put it mildly, an incomprehensible sentence on her stepmother. After the publication of her book, the public learned about the horror that she had to go through at that moment. Lydia said that she finally does not feel lonely. She noted that in the process of writing the material there were, and those people who said that she should not talk about what happened to because there were quite personal details. However, she considered that Victims of such crimes should talk about everything, because in this way it was possible to save other people. In 2014, a book was published under the title Ordinary Intest Ethnologist Leonore Lex, Employees, National Centre for Scientific Research in France, one of the most prestigious institutes in the world. In this publication, the author talked about the case of Lydia. Based on a year-long ethnographic study conducted in the city of Cologne, where the main events took place, Leonore tried to understand for what reason none of the residents condemned Raymond's actions and did not report the facts of bullying to law enforcement agencies. Perhaps the answer to this question was hidden in the phrase uttered by one of the respondents' residents. Answering the question of the author of the book, this man said that, in his opinion, what happens behind the doors of the house should remain there some time after Lydia gained freedom. She met a man named Sylvain Skurler. Sylvain apparently was the man who came into the life of a woman to heal her soul from severe pain. Soon after they met, the couple got married and had 2 children. Lydia said that she found hope in her husband. The woman who met life gave several more interviews to the media and also took part in the creation of a number of documentaries about her story. Sylvain always accompanied her. Despite the fact that she tried not to put her relationship on display, she still lives with an indelible about her imprisonment. Moreover, she is constantly reminded of the scars on her body. In the late 2000s, Lydia, having enlisted the support of a lawyer, appealed to the Judicial Commission with the aim of receiving payments that were due to victims of certain crimes. In her appeal, she claimed that in addition to torture and abuse by her guardians, she was deprived of the opportunity to receive an education. And this undoubtedly complicated work. Moreover, she was not even registered in the social security system, since she did not know how to write at all, and therefore could not fill out the necessary independently, among other things. The appeal said that as a result of burns received at an early age, she received a certain degree of disability. So for Lydia, it was important to get several things. Firstly, so that her status as a victim was legally recognized. Secondly, she wanted to receive funds from the state to buy a house so that she would never return to the place where she was tortured. Thirdly, the opportunity to both receive and pay for individual lessons within the general educational program. On November 16, 2009, it was announced that the Commission for Compensation for Victims of Crime awarded Lydia a monetary amount of €100,000. Compensation was also provided to her children, whom she gave birth to, from Raymond. As it became known, they all found normal, stable work, rebuilt their lives, and created their own families. Today, Lydia is 61 years old. Her path to a normal and full life was long and thorny. Her scars, both emotional and physical, required specialized treatment for a long time. However, with the support of her husband, she was able to start living anew. She always presented herself as a strong and cheerful woman. Despite everything, she later resumed her communication with her brother and sister. However, according to her, by her own admission, she is still angry at Brunner, who didn't take her with him every day. Opening the front door of her own house, she takes a deep breath and with bated breath remembers the moment in her life in which the door could not be unlocked. Thank you very much for watching.